Travelling Picture Show is giving 4 Northern Irish towns the chance to celebrate their past, their stories and their characters, as captured by local amateur filmmakers and television crews. Some of the films have lain hidden in attics and archives for decades. Now we're bringing them back to the heart of the community where they came from. We're going to meet some of the people who made the films, those who appear in them, and those with a story to tell. We've invited them to come and see the past flicker into life on the silver screen and get a rare glimpse of their town and its people in days gone by. Today we've pitched our Travelling Picture Show cinema tent in Newry. We'll see films that show the town's industrial past, the glory days of the show bands, school life in the 1960s, and what it was like to be a punk in Newry in the 1980s. Here we are in McLennan Park, right in the centre of Newry, a place I've been to many times in the past. Then it was a town, but just as busy and full of life as the city is today. Now, many people would regard this border city as a shopping destination, but Newry has a very rich industrial past, which still shapes the city and its people. Although its roots go back centuries, much of Newry was shaped by that industrial heritage and built around the canal that runs right through the heart of the city. Opened in 1742, it was the first summit canal to be built in the UK or Ireland, and in its heyday carried goods and passengers between Newry and Lough Neagh. Although the inland section of the canal was abandoned once the railways came in, it continued to be used in Newry, ferrying goods between the warehouses and businesses that had grown up around its banks and the busy Newry docks. Well, I've come out to Victoria Lough, where the Newry Ship Canal meets the sea, and on this beautiful day and everything looking so peaceful, it's very hard to believe when you look down the waterway that once this was the gateway to one of the busiest ports in Ireland. Cargo ships and steamboats came into the bustling port of Newry from all over northwest Europe, bringing in coal from England, timber from Sweden, slate from Wales, and taking out livestock, dairy produce and linen.
On a busy day, there'd be lots of noise with the livestock. Coal was being discharged, the noise of the coal dropping under the cranes, the noise of the cranes themselves. They were powered by electricity, and there was a humming sound came from them. And then further down we had a container berth, and there was a large crane there for lifting containers on and off the ship there, and everything was just a hub of activity.
Many of our audience today have no memory whatsoever of the port in Newry. They're seeing images of it for the very first time. For Gabby Curran, it's as if it was yesterday. Gabby, I like the way you brought along a lot of memorabilia today. So who did this belong to?
It's mostly related to my father and the Newry docks. My father was a docker, and so every boat my father worked at. And now, looking back on it, it's actually a history of some of the ships that come up the Newry Canal.
Why did they keep such a diligent record?
The reason being that they get a fortnight's pay in the summertime. You had to work and put a stamp on every week.
This was important to him.
That was his filing, so that was his computer, that was everything in there. It's part of Newry's memorabilia.
Beach computers, eh?
They were great people. Great different times, Gloria.
Not all dockers were card men like Gabby's father.
It was called getting a score, and there was maybe 80 people there looking for a job.
Patsy Quinn recalls what it was like for the many casual labourers who queued from well before dawn to try and get a day's work.
There was a massive big shed, and there was a man called Jimmy Coughlin. He was the foreman. And all the guys looking for occasional work, well, they all lined up in a row, and he just walked along the line and said, "You, or you." When I was about 16, I was unemployed for about a month, and I got a job working on the steam packet. And I started at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I went right through to 3 o'clock the next morning. And in those days when I was working, I was earning about £2.10 a week. And for that one day at the steam pack, which was carrying 100-weight and 200-weight bags all day long, I got about over £4, which was a lot of money. When I finished the steam pack at 3 o'clock in the morning, my chin was hitting my knees. I was bent over from carrying bags.
The lasting memory that I have was travelling up and down to the locks on the Olive. The captain would bring us down to the locks and we would get a lift home or come back up on another collier. Sometimes he would let you steer the ship. We were 12, 13 years of age and this was just top drawer stuff.
Boats continued to be a source of fascination for boys young and old. But by the 60s, business on the Newry Canal was in decline. In 1968, a cargo boat, the St William, crashed into the Victoria Lock gates, ripping them off their hinges. The port was closed for weeks, and the incident spelt the beginning of the end for the Newry Ship Canal. Just 6 years later, a local church group making a film captured the last working day on the canal.
I was fortunate enough to get a reel of film handed to me by a guy out of one of the schools.
Today, the hoisting of the flag is a signal to the Anna Brewer to sail towards Newry for the last time. Because the canal which linked Newry with the world in 1742 will close as a navigational waterway. We are waiting to welcome the last ship.
I was watching it. I was just getting fed up then all of a sudden. But this wee boat appeared coming by Norwater Castle and there was a mist that morning and it just looked so beautiful and I watched it. And then when I seen the name on the ship, I realised I'd heard my father speak about the last wee working boat coming up the Newry Canal. And it was a wee small oil tanker and that was about 1974 and thank God somebody had the sense to film it because it actually was the last working boat on the Newry Canal.
Ailish, I watched you watching the film and
Yes.
enjoying it very much.
Yeah.
Now, just tell me why you were there that day when the last ship left.
Well, it was a film that was been made called Kick Any Stone. And it's an expression, you know, of kick any stone in South Armagh, all this history will leap up at you.
So what do you remember of the vision of the ship leaving the canal?
Well, I don't actually think the boat was there. I think we were just videoed
Really?
waving, yeah, and then the boat was edited in.
No, so you were just acting for the
Yeah, we
film.
were just acting, but I could be wrong. I could be wrong.
A lot of very hard work has gone into restoring the canal to create something of a haven for wildlife, for walkers, for cyclists, along its 18-mile route all the way to Portadown. But you know, there was a time when nobody seemed to know what to do with it. No longer viable as a port, Newry turned its back on the ship canal. For years it was little more than a dumping ground. There was even talk about building over it. But there was one annual event when the whole town came down to the canal to have fun. And by the late 1970s, Newry Canal Festival was proving so popular that the BBC sent a crew down to find out what it was all about.
The festival started off on a Saturday with a gigantic parade. It really was. It surprised the committee, you know. We knew it was going well. We knew the response was tremendous, but we were very surprised on Saturday with the crowds.
It wasn't long before Wendy Austin, a plucky girl, was getting roped into one of the more unusual events of Festival Week.
Do you not think that maybe you might take up a bit of ordinary, sensible mountain climbing? Do you not call this sensible? I suppose you needed to build your stamina up. Oh, I don't need to build my stamina up.
The festival was something that the whole community could enjoy and look forward to from year to year. Those times were hard in Newry. There would have been a lot of unemployment and a lot of people emigrated. So this was a bit of light relief and it was maybe distraction for people, if you like, for the whole community to come together and enjoy community events.
The Canal Festival Queen competition added a bit of glamour to the occasion.
It came as a big surprise. Someone nominated me to enter, and I still don't know who that was. I was excited, and it was a girly thing too, but then panic set in. What have I got in my wardrobe to wear for all these different events? The Canal tub race was one of the big events. There was a slogan, "Don't fall in, join in." Unfortunately, everybody did fall in when they were on the canal, because everybody had to make their own vessel, and not all of them were seaworthy.
What about next year? Have you any special plans for that?
I have, but I'm not giving any secrets away.
Well, now, Maureen, you ran the Canal Festival for a great number of years. So what was the atmosphere like during those festivals?
Well, the first couple of festivals, it was very low-key because we were in the middle of trouble times. And in those days, not too many people went out in the town of Newry after, say, 5, 6 o'clock in the evening. And the whole idea of the festival was to get the people socialising again and coming out. So after maybe 2-3 years, it really began to build. We had a schools committee. It wasn't just a festival of street activities. We had arts, sport and social events and civic events. You could have 3,000 to 4,000 people along the canal.
And great atmosphere, presumably.
Oh, fabulous.
Up in the morning and off to school. The teacher is teaching the...
Back in the mid-1960s, there was a great feeling of optimism, not just in Newry, but right across Northern Ireland. The old was making way for the new. Buildings, motorways, hospitals and schools. In Newry, the new Ashgrove Intermediate School was the height of modern 60s.
Ring goes the bell.
Teacher Erwin Major made this short film of a day in the life of 2 Ashgrove school pupils.
You're fortunate to take your time to eat. Back in the classroom, open your books. Even the teacher don't know how neat she looks.
So Erwin, is a very interesting piece of film. Why did you decide to make this day in the life of?
Well, a new school had been opened in Newry, and we were very proud of it. We decided to follow a boy and the girl through school. So it was basically to publicise a school to the parents.
You gotta get something that's really hot. With the one you love, you're making romance.
How did you choose those 2 pupils in particular?
One was very boisterous and one was very good.
I was teaching home economics, or as it was called, domestic science.
Domestic science.
And it was lovely to see it on the film, and a little girl that I literally haven't seen in, I'm sure, 50, 60 years. There she was, digging away. And
so you enjoyed watching the film today, did you?
Very much, and there were a whole lot of faces I recognised, which I didn't think I would do.
I must tell you, I really enjoyed watching the film today, so thank you very much for your expertise all those years ago. But Ashgrove Intermediate pupils had other things on their minds besides school. The 1960s was a great time to be young, and Newry was gripped by showband fever. The show bands had grown out of the old ballroom orchestras of the 1950s, but to cater for a new, younger audience, they had embraced American rock and roll, country and pop. If you could dance to it, the show bands played it. Newry alone produced dozens of bands, including the Hilton, Deirdre and the Defenders, the Soundtracks and the Epic. This is the town hall in Newry, very dominant as you come into the town itself. But not that far away from here was the old Ardmore Hotel owned by the Scallon family. I used to do quite a bit of cabaret there myself. It was great fun. But you know, this town has always been oozing with musical talent, and the competition was always very keen. So anybody who came to perform in the town knew that they had to put on a good show.
I've been told when a boy meets a girl, takes a trip around the world. Hey, hey.
The 60s were the magic years for the bands. Newry, the town hall, was the place to be on a Saturday night, and there was bands from all over Ireland played in the town hall. Bands like the Cadets from Dublin, the Clipper Carrington from Derry, Every county was represented with bands. It was a magical era. I sometimes thought that anybody could put together a band and make a living at it in the 60s. It wasn't quite that simple, but I sometimes thought that.
Dick Barton was the lead guitarist with the Skyrocket show band. Here they are doing a gig in Enniskillen in 1960.
It brings me joy. People seem so happy in the film and enjoy their dancing so much. In those days, it really was possible to play 6 and 7 nights a week. That's not an exaggeration, because you might go from the Lammas Fair straight down to the Rose of Tralee and play at festivals that took part. And in some ways, it was like a party that went on for 7 years. It really was. Because when the night was good and it went well and people came up or they danced and they enjoyed themselves, for us it was like being at a really good night ourselves. It was crazy.
The show bands were part of a bigger music scene in the 60s that saw huge stars like the Beatles, Cliff Richard and the Rolling Stones coming to play gigs here.
Please release me, let me go.
To actually play on the same bill as, say, somebody like Engelbert Humperdinck was amazing. To hear him sing Please Release Me, and you could almost reach out. For us, that was as big a thrill as for anybody else in that hall. And the people would flock up round the stage and listen. And then after that, you know what? They were satisfied. They wanted to dance again. And that's where we fitted into the picture.
Not to be outdone by the big names of the UK charts, some show band members made it onto the international stage for themselves.
One day, while I was out walking.
The Eurovision that year was in the Royal Albert Hall in London. Pat McGuigan sang Chance of a Lifetime.
Now you may know him better as the father of the boxer Barry McGuigan, but Pat McGuigan was the lead singer of Dick's band, the Skyrockets.
Think of that wonderful day.
We played on the recording of it, but we didn't actually get to play in the Royal Albert Hall. But to have our lead singer there and perform with all his heart, that was enough for us.
There's a chance of life.
He finished 4th place. Cliff Richard managed to finish 2nd with a tune called Congratulations, which we've heard at every birthday party since.
Rosemary, it's marvellous to see just a smattering there of the show band era. What do you remember of that?
Oh, absolutely. The Hilton Show Band, I remember. And Barry McGuigan's father singing as well. What a fabulous voice. He sang, you know, a voice like Matt Monro. Yeah, so it was lovely to see.
I think what people forget is just how big the show bands were.
Yes, they were. I wasn't allowed out to see them, you see.
Why was that? You were too young?
Because I was too young.
Were you impressed by the band so much that you wanted to do it?
I wanted to sing with the bands. But my father used to sort of say, no, if you want to sing by yourself, don't be going out with all the bands. He must have thought, you know, rock and roll and...
Of course, by the time Rose Marie was making a name for herself, the heyday of show bands was well and truly over. It was also the end of an era for the local linen trade when Bestbrook Mill closed for business. Once people flocked out of Newry in their hundreds to work in the linen mill, which was the centrepiece of this Quaker model village, a purpose-built mill town which famously had no pub, no pawn shop and no police station. The electric tram built in 1885 to bring coal and flax from the wharfs in Newry continued to bring workers to the mill in Bestbrook until 1948.
I think it only did about 5 or 6 miles an hour. And it went under the 18 arches, the viaduct. I think when I was going under it too, the main Dublin train went over this. I wasn't looking at the thing overhead, you know. And that's very exciting now, because it would be only my generation who would ever be near it.
They used to say if you threw your school bag out, you could jump out and get it and run after the tram and get in again. There's a magazine about the tram, and my sister is standing in the tram doorway getting out of the tram.
Halfway between Newry and Bessbrook, there was an electric dynamo with a man went in and give it a shot to take it up the hill.
When the tram was there, I never missed getting on the bus. I think there was only one bus, or maybe two, which meant that I would have been in Newry in 10 minutes. The tram might have been there for half an hour. It was only 20 minutes, but I still then had to walk another mile when I got to Newry.
I lived on the road leading into Newry at the time, and I remember the workers coming out in the morning, walking, early in the morning, loads of them walking out of Newry. And that would have been about 3.5 miles, wouldn't it?
Yep.
To come out to their work. And then some of them in the spinning and everything worked in their bare feet, and
Because there was a lot of water, you see.
a lot of water in the spinning, and they used
The water just flowed across their feet all the time.
and like they'd been standing most of the day and then walking back to Newry.
Linen manufacturing was at its peak in Northern Ireland in the early 1900s. Believe it or not, Bessbrook Mill alone had around 4,000 workers.
I left school at 14 and started in Bessbrook Mill. I think it was the day after my 14th birthday. And I might as well tell you, having never been in a factory and gone into a room about 100 yards long with about 100 machines in it, and the noise and the heat and the steam for a young fella who had never been there, I was scared stiff. But after about a week or two, you found out and got talking to other people, and the older women were great. They really looked after you well. Some of them knew my mother, and that was a big plus as well. And then after a while they were giving you sandwiches. I think I was that skinny, I think they were trying to build me up a bit.
In the weaving shed where I worked, there was over 100 looms, and that noise, you had to learn to lip read, because if one of the attendants was working away over at the far side of the shed and he wanted, say, a 5/8 spanner, he wasn't walking over, he'd say to you, "Graham, 5/8 spanner." You had to read the lips and take it over to him.
There was a big alleyway up the centre, clear. The machines all were long ways, facing each other. Now, a girl would be responsible for those two sides of that. But down at the end, they always had a stool. And once they had everything running, they used to just sit and watch to see would something go wrong. But quite often, a couple of them would be talking. And I would be quite often pretending I was oiling the machine. And if I looked down, they immediately put their hand up to their mouth because they knew I could lip read. And I'm not going to go into any of the stories I heard, but it was interesting.
No sooner had the sound of the loom ceased than Bessbrook reverberated to noise of a very different kind. John Davis's garden backs onto what at one time was the busiest heliport in Europe.
I've moved into, I suppose you could call it a military war zone. It was absolutely bustling with noise. The noise was horrendous. There would have been flights every 8 minutes. That would have been your Lynx or your Gazelles or the Wessex.
John made a virtue out of his home's proximity to the helicopters. As a keen amateur filmmaker and photographer, it provided him with plenty to film.
It was my private air show, you could say, like I was in the right place at the right time. Sitting in the house, I could tell, oh, that's the Wessex taking off. Oh, that's the Chinook coming in. We had names of the helicopters. We called the Chinook the egg mixer because of its sound coming from 2 miles away. You could hear from 2 miles away. So that gave me time to take my photographs and that. The stage you could tolerate the noise, and the stage you couldn't. Sometimes the noise would be so unbearable. I would put headphones on and cut the grass and just get on with weeding the garden, and then go in, hang the washing out, whatever had to be done, just get on with it. Nothing was going to stop me. And you just had to get on with your life. You can't let it hold you up. It was just part of normal living in Bestbrook.
John knew this wouldn't last forever. And when the day came that Bestbrook military base was to close, he was there to capture it on camera.
This was the last helicopter to take off from Bestbrook Heliport, and it signalled the end of Operation Banner. I was really delighted that I was granted permission to get the shot, and it's a super shot because I knew I had to get this one right, and I was so delighted with the shot. I thought, wow, what a shot to get. I couldn't believe it. It's history, it's a moment in history.
Seeing the cows grazing here today, it's very hard to imagine that this field was once part of a major military installation. We have one last reminder of Newry in the 1980s.
Right, Newry, it's a place that's probably better known for its lengthy queues at the border, and I suppose a town that most people will only get to see if they were travelling through it to go down south. But what's a place like to live in? Well, we thought we'd give our film crew to some people who lived there, so as they could tell us what they thought of Newry.
Channel 1 at the time was a very popular youth culture show for Northern Ireland people, and a couple of bands that we had liked had been on it. So that was our gateway. We thought, this is us, this is on our way.
Usually the singer is the front person in the band, and I suppose to just put my face forward, you know, probably it was better looking than the rest of them anyway, you know, but
in your dreams.
In Newry, if you're a punk, there's nothing to do, there's no opportunities, and there's no one going to accept us at all.
Our gathering spot was outside Woolies, where we used to just hang around there, meet up with friends, scoff at passers-by. If you could afford a couple of albums into Woolies, you went and got a couple of albums and stuff.
But for only one punk band in the town, there was a lot of punks about. Newry
Yeah.
well renowned for plenty of punks about.
this woman came up to me one day and she says, hey, well, you wouldn't happen to have a safety pin? And I says, yeah, I would. So safety pins all over my jacket, so I kept on. She opened it up and stuck it in my ass. I says, what'd you do that for? She says, it's just something I've always wanted to do.
We'll go up to Friar Tuck's for something neat. We'll just hang about there until it comes it's time to go home.
Soap in the hair.
As much as possible.
Egg white. Coke.
And then whenever it rained, all the soap would run into the eyes and you'd be trying to get across the road before your car hit you.
Or on a summer's day, you're getting chased down the street by wasps.
So that's Newry. There's nothing to do for a punk. Nothing's going to change. We're just going to have to get out.
And for weeks and months and even years, you know, walking down. Are you still here? Are you not away yet?
It's a bit embarrassing, but still very glad we did it.
We didn't do anybody any harm. We were just out to have a good time, just to enjoy ourselves, and that's what we did.
I love it. What a marvellous reminder of the punk era. Now, the punks may never have left Newry, but I have to tell you, the Travelling Picture Show does. So we're about to pick up our tent and move to another town. We have more wonderful films to show, great stories to reveal, and fabulous people to meet.
And indeed, there are two more ports of call for the Travelling Picture Show next week, Portadown and Rich Hill. That's Monday at 7:30. Later tonight, we have more emigration stories for you. Local people making the big decision to leave Northern Ireland in search of a new life, or just simply some work. Departure Diaries, 10:35.